this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. It's hard to believe I'm actually starting my 19th year as a college professor. You know, I've worked almost as long as a college professor as I did as a death investigator. And over the course of time, I've learned a lot about helping students find their direction. Now, I can't tell them what to do with their lives. I think a lot of people really want that. And I see it every now and then as an advisor. But you can't really. People have to figure out their own path. And there's kind of this old cliche that goes around, not just in academic circles, but also among the general population that may have gone to college at some point in time. It's said that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when people choose to major in psychology as an undergraduate major, they're not necessarily looking to be a therapist, but they're looking to try to self-analyze, to try to figure out those things that are going on in their life and make some sense of it. And of course, in this crazy world, Lord knows you're looking for that sort of thing. But today we're going to go down a road that's kind of gruesome and kind of unique in the sense that we do have one of those undergraduate majors, a psychology major, who went on to attain a master's degree in what we refer to as the helping arts. The only difference with this guy is that he's accused of first-degree murder. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I think for a long time, when I was a young man, you know, when you get to college, it's so confusing. It's overwhelming. It's not just you're living away from home or that you're meeting new people. It's like I tell my son, my wife tells my son this too. Your job right now, in addition to the others, that he has a job, but he's also in the Air Guard and all that sort of stuff. But your job right now as an undergraduate student is being an undergraduate student, being focused on the task at hand, choosing what you're going to do, have a major and this sort of thing. But, when you're first coming into higher ed for the first time as a kid right out of high school, it's overwhelming. I mean, it really is. Campus is so big. There's so many people, and they've got all of these majors that you can choose from, particularly today compared to when you and I started. They used to make fun of people that take underwater basket weaving classes, for instance, as filler. There are a huge number of these majors that are out there that you have no idea. If you just read it, it kind of sounds cool, but then you don't really know what it is or what the utility of it is.
When you are making decisions for the first time on what you're going to be or do, making those decisions as a teenager are not the same decisions you would make as an adult 20 years later. Here's a guy, Travis McBride, who's 46 years old, and he's a therapist, an anger management therapist. You mentioned this in your opening. Some people study things to find out why they are the way they are. This man is an anger therapist. He took his education in being a therapist. And yet here we have the headline: Florida anger management therapist charged with murder, killing a homeless man, and stuffing the body in the trunk of his car. There's your story, Joe. He is a therapist with a focus on anger management, who apparently has a track record of losing his temper and being very angry and attempting to or successfully killing someone. That's the person we're dealing with today.
I had a moment in time where I was thinking back actually to the old movie Stripes.
Right.
And when in one of the first scenes in that movie, they're all gathered around in the squad bay, and Sergeant Hulka is taking off his hat and he's talking to as a drill sergeant, what's your background? Of course, that never happened to me when I was in the Army. But they're sitting, and this is all Hollywood. And John Candy is there, and they ask him, so what's your backstory? And he says, well, I internalize a lot of my anger, and I eat, and his name in the movie is called Ox. He's huge, and he
my
said
name's
that
Dewey Oxburger. My friends call me Ox.
Yeah, and exactly.
You might have noticed that I've got a bit of a weight problem.
No. And he says that he had gone through training, therapy, and to deal with his anger, the stuffing and eating of anger and all this stuff, and you think about folks that are out there, and obviously, I mean, all you got to do is drive down an interstate highway, and you will see multiple people, including myself, that are probably in need of a bit of anger therapy. People talking to themselves, going down the road, shaking their fist, making obscene gestures, maybe cutting people off in traffic. That I think that's probably where it's most visible. And then you get into the darker side where you've got people that have threatened to harm people, to do grievous bodily injury to them, and maybe they're routed toward a therapist that can help them deal with anger. And I said that the air is, it's thick with irony here. I think when you begin to think about McBride in this case, that he is literally, he's hung a shingle up, Dave. I mean, that's the term that they use when you get through all of your training and therapy, and you can go out and you can make money now. You can charge Medicare or Medicaid or whatever it is, and you can bill them, and insurance covers it. And he'll sit there and I'm thinking, what would one of his therapy sessions been like? Is he got that kind of the deep satiny stylings, where he's very calm, he's kind of, well, how, and they always ask questions. I'm like, well, how does that make you feel? And that's the thing that they draw, they draw you out, you think about this guy, and he's gone through all of this training, but yet it would seem, based upon what we're understanding, that he didn't necessarily self-apply any of these lessons in his life. What do you think about that? If
he did, what's this monster really like? Because what we know he did, we do know that Travis McBride, looking up his resume, which you can do on LinkedIn and a number of social media things. But he attended the University of Central Florida, where he earned a bachelor's in psychology in 2005, and he got his master's in clinical psychology in 2007. He previously owned a place called Central Florida Mental Health Incorporated. Now, whenever I see somebody that has owned something that's in their field, I wonder what happened to that one that he had to stop and reevaluate and relaunch, because he is now a licensed Florida mental health counselor and the owner of Starting Point Mental Health. And it's located, he started it in 2009, and his office is located in the same place in which he lives. And so that address, that kind of confused me at first, Joe, when I was looking at this story, saying, where is the victim and how did they come into play? It's because Travis McBride has a home and office in the same place, and that's where he meets people. But can I pause you just for a second there, Dave? There's something, I don't know how to phrase it. There's something, okay, I'll just say it. There's something scary to me about that. First off, that if you're, and I know this happens in a lot of places, but, and physicians have had this has gone on for a long, long time. But the idea that you're doing therapy, and it's in your home, in your domicile, and that the patients that you're seeing know where you are, they have access, or they perceive themselves
to have access, because people think, well, I'm paying you money, I should have access to you at any point in time, which I might need it. And, I know where you live.
Wow.
And that's an interesting situation to put yourself in. But I guess that it's more economically feasible, because if you can carve out an area in your own home, you're not having to pay monthly rent on some other place in a business park somewhere.
Well, if you're just doing it as you're a one-off, you don't, you handle your own scheduling of appointments and things like that. Yeah, economically speaking, it would make sense. In the TV show Ozark that was on Netflix with Jason Bateman, he and his wife go see a therapist, and it's in her home. It didn't hit me until right now when we were talking about this So my only other thing on therapy was, back in the 70s, watching the Bob Newhart show, and he had a real office with a real receptionist. So I don't know what the deal is with him, but I do know that he did own a therapist place that he shut down, and that I want to know why, what caused you. But that's not the story today. The story today is how an anger management therapist, and by the way, I don't know if that was his, job where he was the anger management specialist, but like many things where people are sent by the court system to go to AA meetings or go to a therapist for anger management, we do see that and hear it about court situations that might have been one of those things that he became so he could get those clients, that were forced into it. I don't know. I'm just riffing here. But any way you look at it, he was known as a therapist who focused on or specialized with anger management, and he has a record. And when I say a record, we've got a man here that is accused of first-degree murder, Joe, and it's in Florida. So what does that tell us? Possible death penalty case.
Yep.
And this guy, this therapist, has a bit of a background, Joe. If you were going to see somebody, let's say you got into a fight with your neighbor and you pleaded it down to a misdemeanor based on, collecting trash on the side of the road, and you need to go see an anger management therapist for X number of times. That's what the court sentences you to. And you end up at this guy's office. Are you going to look at his background and find out if he's any good, or are you just going to go? Because I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, Joe, based on what he's accused of doing in the past, I don't think I'm playing.
Yeah, and that goes to the state, doesn't it? Because the state issues a license for individuals, and
oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, they're the ones that, kind of decide, who's going to have the ability, if you can jump through all the hoops. And trust me, in therapy training, there's tons of hoops you have to jump through. These markers along the way you have to meet, and then sit for an exam before they give you the license, because it is a license type of thing. It really makes me wonder how deep did the state actually dive into his past? Because, Dave, we've got a guy that has previously been arrested for felony aggravated battery. And he's
actually, looking at it, Joe, some of this is similar to what he's accused of now.
Yeah. And doesn't that kind of meshes with this idea of trying to figure out who you are, trying to figure out maybe what you are in this life, trying to understand what would make you lash out at an individual, because obviously he's had experience with this in the past. The only difference is at this time, it wound up in a murder charge.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Us investigators are what some people might call nosy Nellies. we like to dig into things and see what kind of past people have. It's almost like it's very voyeuristic in that sense. We have a task to go back in time to try to understand victims and certainly perpetrators. And when you're looking at a case like this with such a level of violence attached to it, really makes you scratch your head, doesn't it, Dave? You really wonder, from where does this guy spring from? I guess is what it comes down to.
It's interesting. In looking at this, I've never thought of myself as a nosy Nelly, but now I guess I am. I'm like, I am Mrs. Kravitz across the street,
Bewitched.
Yeah. So here we have Travis McBride. And let's see, he is 46 years old now. So, and the reason I'm saying his age is because from a contemporary standpoint, I want to know, when did he come off the chain? When did he lose his cookies? Because he did. In 1995, this anger therapist actually was arrested for felony aggravated battery. Felony aggravated battery in a case that was sent to the county court where he pleaded not guilty, and it was negotiated into a settlement with everybody involved. Now, dealing with something that happened, 29 years ago?
Yes. Yep.
So that puts him at 17, going on 18, late teens here. So we're talking maybe out of high school, right before.
You're still in the court's mercy zone there.
Yeah.
That's what I like to refer to it as. You get beyond that and all bets are off.
That's a good point. And all right, so he's 17, 18 years old when he picks up he's arrested. Now he's arrested for felony aggravated battery, but not convicted of that. He actually was able to plead it down to a misdemeanor battery. He completed a deferred prosecution agreement. A year after all that goes down, Joe, he's arrested again for felony aggravated battery. So he didn't learn his lesson previously. He's a year older, not a year wiser. He was able to negotiate this one down to a misdemeanor and is sentenced to probation. So 2 times in his late teens, he's arrested for felony aggravated battery.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes,
I
please.
really wonder, looking back, if we had access to those court transcripts, looking back in time, I'm really wondering if the court did not sentence him to some kind of therapy as a result of this. And maybe this is the first time, you never know. I mean, I'm kind of spitballing here.
Yeah.
You never know. Maybe this is the first time that the term anger management therapy kind of enters into his lexicon, where it pops up on his radar, where you're thinking, because he's kind of, when you look at his academic record, Dave, he didn't finish his undergraduate in psychology until like the mid 2000s.
2005.
And then of course from there he springboards on into a graduate. So you think about that gap in time. I don't know what he did. I have no idea.
Right.
Maybe he was working full time and trying to grind it out a little by little. And I mean, I did that. I'm not one of these people that comes from a background where I went off to college and I stayed there for the full 4 years and then, ascended academically. Wow, that sounds really arrogant, but it came. I did it as an adult student, is what I'm saying. So that's another interesting peek, I think, into his background. It's the type of thing we would look at as investigators, particularly when you're talking about the kind of charges he's facing, Dave.
Well, in what we're looking at here, he's 27 when he picks up the bachelor's in psychology. It means he just went to college later. But when you look at the issues he was having as a guy who gets out of high school, and that's what we're really looking at here in that 1995-96 range. You're dealing with a guy who's just out of high school and don't know if he was going to college, community college, whatever at the time, but there's nothing there. We've got some blankness here for a number of years and negotiates these aggression issues. He gets them down. And from what I can find, from the 1996 arrest and charging with felony aggravated battery. He's not charged again with anything until 2017. So he lasts 20 years from one arrest to the next. But in that 20-year period of time, he does go to college. He does become he's successful at his college career here. Got the bachelor's in 2005, master's in clinical psychology 2 years later in 2007. I don't know what he was doing before then. I mean, we kind of assume 4 years for the bachelor's, right? So say he started that in 2001. But between his last arrest for the battery in 96 to 2000, 2001, there's a 5-year period we don't really know what he was doing.
Yep.
And maybe anger management was part of his thing. I would kind of assume that was part of the sentence because you got two attacks within a year. I mean,
and one was initially a felonious attack, and that goes to either the level of violence or the level of threat, because they both
were felonies. Both of those,
got reduced. And you think about the term battery versus assault, and
what is
this is kind of interesting. The way I had, you can. Let me see. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but the way you look at it, one actually means it's more all-encompassing, because you can threaten somebody with grievous bodily harm and be charged with battery, I think.
Okay.
You don't have to put your hands on them, but you can be charged with assault, and sometimes that's coupled with a threat and physical contact. And that's where the assault charge comes on. So we have to wonder, was he merely threatening somebody? Was he menacing? I love that term, by the way, menacing. But in order to kick it up to the degree at which it's a felony, the police felt confident at that point in time that you're dealing with somebody that has, they've got some issues. And that moment in time when he enters onto the radar, who knows, what had transpired at that moment in time. But I gotta tell you, Dave, it's troubling. I think that, it's real easy for people to say, well, everybody deserves a second chance. I agree. Mm-hmm. But there's certain things that, you deserve a second chance. But I look at, you're issuing a license to somebody that has this kind of background. I don't know how seriously they kind of dove into those waters relative to him, because this thing is obviously not something that occurred in the juvenile court system. Mm-hmm. This is something that occurred in, even though it's at the lowest margins here, mm-hmm. it occurred as he's entering into adulthood. So they've issued this guy a license now, these many years later. And I'm thinking to myself, how deeply did you dig into his background?
Well, the one thing we do know is that after the arrest in 95 and 96, and then pleading them down to misdemeanors and apparently finishing whatever the little sentence was, whether it was anger management therapy or whatever, he did complete those. And then he did go to college and got his degree and got his life. It seems like he was getting his life on track and moving forward. And he actually didn't have a problem with anything that we know of legally until 2017. The 2017 arrest is very important, and here's why. We know that he was accused of felony aggravated battery in 95 and 96 when he's in his late teens. But by 2017, we're dealing with 7 years ago. The man is 38, 39 years old at the time, and he is accused of domestic battery by strangulation. His wife at the time said he choked her after she took his dog by the collar and placed it outside. That upset him. She said that he got physically aggressive and he choked her. That's the charge, Joe. Now, when we go back to these and see charges versus conviction, it seems like what you're convicted of is a lot less than what the original charge was. In this particular case in 2017, where he's charged with a domestic battery by strangulation, nothing happened because his wife changed her mind and she would not pursue charges. And he never admitted to choking her. That's in 2017. The dog involved here is what I was talking about as the reason this is important. Because the dog was the thing that pushed him over the edge into the alleged attack on his wife at the time. And what he's accused of now, Joseph Scott Morgan, also includes his dog.
You think about how much time has elapsed at this point in time, in this man's life. And, we have to understand that at this point in time, in 17, he's already set up in practice, Dave.
Yep.
He's out there, quote unquote, taking care of folks, which I went back and took a look at the assault versus battery charges. Mm-hmm. Battery actually means, that you're putting your hands on somebody, that you've kind of crossed the Rubicon at that point in time, because you can assault somebody and verbally make this comment, I'm going to harm you. Mm-hmm. And dependent upon what the prosecutor gauges as the threat level or the potential, this kind of menacing thing that comes along, they can charge you with assault. But now we're looking at a situation, Dave, where we've gone beyond just a verbal threat or maybe putting his hands on someone or even an animal. Now we're looking at an escalation of violence to the point where we've got a fellow who has a perceived slight, perhaps. He's been insulted some way. Somebody is not obeying him. And instead of reaching out, putting his hands on this individual, he pulls out a weapon and he essentially executes this homeless guy, Dave, that's there at his office or in proximity of his office / home. That's a heck of an escalation.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Dave, I love stories. I love to hear stories. I like to kind of break them apart, dissect them. Did you know some of the coolest stories I've ever heard when I was out on the street working as a death investigator were interviews that were conducted as a result of crossing paths with the homeless? They've all got a story.
I'm glad you said it that way, Joe. Because oftentimes when we talk about the homeless, we talk about them as kind of an anonymous, faceless group, when in reality, each homeless person has a story to tell. Clinton Dorsey, no different. Clinton Dorsey was 51. He had been married to his wife, Lisa, for 28 years. They had recently separated. They'd fallen on hard times in Florida, had trouble finding a place to rent. Clinton Dorsey is working as a handyman, day laborer, what have you. Well, his wife, Lisa, finally said, I've had enough, and she moved in with one of their adult children in Kansas City. Clinton Dorsey remained in Florida, where he stayed in a homeless encampment in the woods across the street from where Travis McBride had his home and his anger management counseling office. He, McBride, and Dorsey had a problem. I don't know the ins and outs of the problem, but I do know this. Travis McBride told neighbors that Clinton Dorsey was trying to hurt his dogs by making them eat glass. That was what Travis McBride had told us. That's the genesis, the root of their problem with one another that led to everything that follows in this episode of Body Bags.
But, you look at this, and this event in and of itself has some really cold-blooded elements to it, doesn't it?
We got witnesses, Joe, neighbors, and that's where we get the story from, because McBride's not really talking, Here's what we got. Police respond to a call of a suspicious incident. When I see something like that, it's kind of like with Koberger out in Idaho, it was an unconscious person. You have 4 people that have been destroyed, blood everywhere, but it's an unconscious person. So this incident began with a call at 7:06 a.m. on a Thursday in January in Florida. Suspicious incident. When police arrive, well, let me get to the 911 call because they're both anonymous. But the first call, the call says that the person was looking in the road, that a person is looking in the road and cleaning up the blood off the ground and searching for shells. This is a 911 call saying a man is cleaning up blood out of the street. A second 911 call comes in, and this is where I want to be very specific on this because the 911 calls said things such as a woman saw McBride shoot Clinton. This is a very specific thing. A 911 call. I saw Travis McBride shoot Clinton Dorsey. They didn't know his last name. Called him Clinton. A woman saw McBride drag Clinton's body across the street into the wooded area, the area he had been living. These are words on the 911 call, Joe. A woman claims McBride visited her home before the shooting looking for Clinton Dorsey. McBride told the woman that Clinton Dorsey put glass in a jar to hurt his dogs. McBride said he was going to kill Clinton Dorsey.
Wow. Yeah. You talk about, going to a premeditative event here. And that's not only revealed, obviously, in this statement, which, by the way, is a pretty bold thing to say to some citizen that you have, maybe a neighbor that you have a relationship with, because now you're looking at it from the investigator's perspective, you're able to fit together a timeline here and with specific markers along the way. And there's evidence also post-event too, because you've got this subject going out into the middle of the road or adjacent to that area to clean up blood. Well, what exactly does that mean when you're cleaning up blood? We can think about the methodologies that are used. Did he show up with bleach? Did he show up with a big push broom? Did he have buckets of water? And what does that go to talk about his state of mind? Well, this is, that legal concept, the Greek saying of menis rea, where you have this idea of a guilty mind. And then you think about actus reus, the guilty act. You combine both of those and you have concurrence. So all the way around here, we're looking at a guy that's that has plainly stated he's going to kill somebody, and apparently does, because it's a witness shooting, and then he drags this individual off into the woods. Well, when you're looking at a death investigation, one of the things, particularly in a wooded area, one of the things we're looking at, and you hear this a lot, are things called drag marks, because the dead are literally dead weight. So if you grab somebody beneath their armpits and you're dragging them away, one of the bits of evidence that we're looking for are, for instance, if you've got somebody that's face up, are their heels dragging behind them and they're leaving marks in the dirt. Maybe they're barefooted, or maybe they have tennis shoes on, or, if you've got like heavy work boots on, that's going to leave almost these parallel furrows that kind of are created as you're going over soft dirt, passing through grass. And here's the other thing. If he's shot, he will be, I'm not going to say hemorrhaging, because hemorrhaging implies that you're living, okay? We can say that he was leaking blood. The body was. It's not a hemorrhagic event at that point in time. You're actually leaking blood, and this is being left along the way. What a curious position to be in after this guy has gone out and allegedly made the statement he's going to kill somebody, and now he's faced with the aftermath. Why did he not just kill him and leave him be where he was? That goes to higher level thinking at that point. It's gone beyond just this kind of primal reactive kind of thing. Now you have an awareness that you're leaving evidence behind. We know that he's using a semi-automatic weapon because, what did they say? He's going back to pick up spent casings at this point in time. So if he's having to look for shell casings, this is plural, we know that there were multiple shots fired. So every time that firing pin taps on this weapon, you're going to create these little explosions, these gunshots. You're going to draw more and more attention to what you're doing. Can you imagine being this lady that he has a conversation with, and he pointedly tells her, not only do I want to know where he is, want to find him, I'm going to kill him. And maybe she retreats back into her home. Maybe she's looking out the window.
He threatened her too, though, Joe. He threatened her, do not go to the cops.
Wow. He already has he's already amped up relative to these actions that he's involved in, Dave. Yeah. You think about him actually being witnessed dragging the body off into the woods. Well, if you've killed him in one location and you're dragging him away to the woods, why would you want to deposit him back in the area where he was living? And we can speculate on this all we want. We can think about, well, is he trying to make it appear like the guy was killed at his encampment and that he had nothing to do with it? But like so many other things where you have a perpetrator, alleged perpetrator, their mind begins to run and they think about, well, what do I do at this point in time? I'm putting him out in the woods. I've already told this woman I'm going to kill him. I've already admonished her and told her, do not call the cops. You've got all of this evidence laying around, but it's my understanding, Dave, that his body, this was not the final resting place of Mr. Dorsey.
It gets worse, Joe. One of the witnesses to this event said he saw bloody clothing in this dumpster over here. And police go, that one? And he said, yeah, the one parked right next to McBride's car. And so police go over there and sure enough, there's bloody clothing in the dumpster. And they look at this Nissan Versa, McBride's car. I don't know if they saw anything. I don't know what they saw that led them to open the hatch. I don't know yet. But when they did, we know that he drug Clinton Dorsey back into the woods. We know that. At some point, though, Clinton Dorsey ended up in the trunk of that Versa.
And I looked this up, Dave. Do you have any idea? And I can't imagine under any circumstances that you would. I don't even know why I'm asking you this question, but for the sake,
how many bodies fit in the trunk?
Versa is like one of the smallest platforms that Nissan has. It's a tiny car.
Right.
This thing has only got 14.7 cubic feet of space in it. Do you know what you measure with cubic feet? A freezer. So that's the size that we're talking about, like a stand-up freezer. I'm not talking about like a freezer because you could measure that in cubic inches, and you hear that calculation all the time. This is not a large space. My suspicion is that this guy's leaking blood. Okay. You have approximated your car to this dumpster, perhaps. Maybe you drove over to the woods with the car, placed the body in the car itself, and then drove over to the dumpster. You don't know what to do with all of this blood, super saturated clothing. You strip him down naked? Are you taking your clothes off because you have moved him and you've got contact trace on yourself? Because that can, in fact, happen. And then you're going to put him in your trunk. Well, all the cops have to do is if they look down at the leading edge of the rear bumper, or maybe to the side of the car, just above the tail light, there is, or maybe on the trunk hatch itself, people that are placing bodies into these kinds of of spaces are having to leverage literally dead weight. So you have to move around a lot in order to do this. And they will put their hands down on points of leverage to try to lift the body into the car. So there is a high potential with a body leaking blood that you're going to find a lot of blood deposition around the sides of this area. And I really wonder if when the police went over to that dumpster, they can you imagine you're finding bloody clothes in the dumpster and you look down at the vehicle and you've got blood deposition. What a chilling thought there for these officers when they show up. You're thinking, oh my gosh, what hides beneath the lid of this motor vehicle?
Now, when you start investigating, do they call you out then, or did they move him? I mean, I know they're going to check to make sure he's dead, which they're going to do that with him in the trunk, I'm going to assume. Is that correct?
Yeah.
They're not going to get him out.
They would call the ME out to the scene. Obviously, they have a dead body. My preference would be, under these circumstances, is that, and this sounds, I know, kind of ghastly to some people, but my preference would be is to not take him out of the trunk, period. Mm-hmm. What I would want to do is secure that vehicle, put it on a flatbed, cover it with a tarp, and transport that car with the body in place to an evidence garage where the whole car can be processed with the body in place, or medical term in situ, where they're there and you can appreciate it in its normal configuration. Because one of the things that I always return back to in cases like this is going to be the post-mortem interval. We talk about this a lot. And it takes time for rigor to set in, and for the deposition of blood, or the settling of blood rather, and post-mortem lividity. I want to see this body and have it photographed in a controlled environment in its pristine state. It's at that point in time, after you've processed around the body in the trunk of the car, that you can extricate the body and go ahead and process the rest of the car, and the body would be removed to the medical examiner's office for further exam to try to understand the relationship from the shooter to the victim. We're looking at range of fire. Then we're looking at their trajectory. Was he executed, or was these two fellows standing erect facing one another and he fired shots directly into his chest? Here's the other thing as well. This clothing that they have found. How are you going to handle that? It would be great if the medical examiner could actually see the clothing to try to understand the relationship of the defects or holes in the clothing relative to the holes in the body. If, in fact, his clothing was stripped off of him. I think that's very important. Go ahead.
I thought it was McBride's clothing. I thought maybe he just crammed the body in there, but he had bloody clothing, and he threw his bloody clothing in the dumpster.
I would think that would be a high probability here. And what would be the purpose of him taking his own clothing off and putting it in the dumpster? Well, obviously, it's going to have contact trace on it, because if this poor soul, this 51-year-old man who has been living in hell, let's face it, he's in the woods in Florida. Mm-hmm. Imagine what a miserable existence that is. At an encampment, his blood would transfer onto the perpetrator, because you're having to, I can't emphasize this enough, when you're wrangling a body, this idea of dead weight comes in, and blood will contact, it will smear all over you. If you're wearing some type of T-shirt or whatever kind of other shirt, you can get it on the frontal portion of your pants legs. Not to mention, if you have sleeves and they're down, it's going to transfer onto your sleeves. So it makes sense that you would want to toss the clothing. But isn't it interesting that all of this is taking place in very close proximity to where this alleged perpetrator lived and worked, Dave? It's not like he takes this guy out to some far-flung location. It's almost like he's in panic mode at this point in time. The switch has flipped in his brain as to, oh my gosh, I said I was going to do it. I didn't think I was capable of it, but I acted out, and now this man's dead, and it's going to be on me. One interesting little side note in this case is that, and I'm absolutely fascinated by this, is that when it was time for Travis McBride to appear in court for his hearing relative to the murder of Clinton Dorsey, as Clinton Dorsey's wife is sitting there, having traveled back from Kansas, she's waiting at this hearing, this appearance hearing. Travis McBride is nowhere to be found. He refused to show up for his hearing. We're going to keep our eye on this case, and we're going to see what the developments reveal in the case of somebody that has trouble with anger management. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.